Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Florida Historic Capitol Museum. I am Museum Director Tiffany Baker, and I am just ecstatic to be able to welcome you to our final Rotunda Rendezvous program of the year. I'm joined tonight by the Director of Research and Programming, Rachel Porter, who is behind the scenes dealing with the tech issues. So thank you, Rachel. And I'll be introducing you to the team from the Oklahoma State Capitol that will be giving you the behind the scenes tour in just a few moments. This program is also the last program that's affiliated with our Voices and Votes Democracy in America exhibition that we hosted virtually for all of you earlier this year. A lot of the discussion related to the Voices and Votes content revolved around the idea of citizens participating in the civic process. And for us here at the Historic Capitol, an important part of that process is being a site of democracy where many people come to either make their voices heard or to participate in the process by meeting with their legislators, or even someday coming back and serving as a representative or senator. So we really enjoy that connection that we have and can provide for the people of Florida to their political institutions, as is our mission as a museum. One of the other important things that we do here at the Historic Capitol is to share the story of this building, including the extensive renovation that occurred from 1978 to 1982, when this building was saved from demolition. The interesting story about our Capitol complex here is that, unlike many other capitals around the country, like the one that you will see tonight, instead of building onto an existing structure, they invested in a modern structure and built the large Capitol Tower that you see behind the Historic Capitol today. And during that process, they decided then, as I mentioned, to restore the Historic Capitol and take it back to how it looked in 1902. So in many other capitals around the country, they instead decided to build onto the buildings. And many of them, like the Oklahoma State Capitol, have gone through extensive restoration projects in the last few years. Tonight, you'll get a behind the scenes look at one that is in process and ongoing. You'll get to see some of the places that are completed, hear about the special stories, and even get a look at some that have just started the process within the last week. So we're super excited to provide this opportunity for you to maybe check one of your capitals off your 50 Capital Quest with us virtually tonight. So the team that will be joining us from the Oklahoma State Capitol are Thompson, who is the executive director of the Oklahoma Historical Society. He was selected unanimously by the OHS board in 2020 as the director to replace the retiring director, Dr. Blackburn, who had led the agency for 21 years. And prior to becoming the director at the Oklahoma Historical Society, Trait had the unique opportunity to oversee the restoration that you're going to see tonight of the Oklahoma State Capitol. The other staff member that we'll be hearing from as we move through the Oklahoma building is Krista Bolin, who is the media content coordinator for the Oklahoma Office of Management and Enterprise Services. She creates and manages content for the OMES blog, the newsletter and social media platforms, and has an emphasis on written and visual communication. So I'm looking forward to hearing from her tonight. Before I turn the microphone and camera over to the team, I just have a couple of sponsors to thank for this evening. Florida Humanities and the Smithsonian Institution organized the Voices and Votes Democracy in America exhibit. The Andrew W. Mellon Foundation supported the initiative, as well as the Pulitzer Prizes, who partnered on the content as well. And as always, I want to recognize the donors and members of the Florida Historic Capitol Foundation who helped to make opportunities like this special one possible tonight. So thank you so much for supporting us and for being here. All right, I'm excited to turn it over to the team from Oklahoma. So Trait, take it away.
which is the capital city of Oklahoma, but that wasn't always the case. When Oklahoma was founded as a territory in 1889, the territorial capital was in Guthrie, Oklahoma. And when Oklahoma achieved statehood in 1907, once again, the territorial capital or the state capital remained in Guthrie as well. Guthrie is a town about 30 miles to the north of where I'm currently standing. On June 11th, 1910, there was an election that was held, which for the people of Oklahoma to be able to vote where they wanted to hold their capital or to have their capital. Now, that election ended up with Oklahoma City being selected. And as you can imagine, the citizens of Oklahoma City were quite ecstatic that they had won the capital seat of the state, and the citizens of Guthrie were not so happy about that development. So the citizens of Guthrie brought suit against the notion, and the Oklahoma Supreme Court ended up throwing out the election on a technicality. The suit ended up getting moved on throughout the process, and finally, later on, the Supreme Court of the United States actually had to weigh in because there was a clause in the Enabling Act which said that Guthrie had to be the state capital until 1913. Well, the Supreme Court said no, Congress doesn't have an ability to tell a state where it's going to put its capital, so that was null and void. In the meantime, the citizens of Guthrie got together another initiative petition to put the state capital in Guthrie again, and that election happened in 1912. And once again, Oklahoma City was selected as the capital city. And that freed the state to begin looking for a place to put its state capital. Now, the place where I'm standing today wasn't originally going to be the location of the state capital. A site had been selected near a place called War Acres, Oklahoma, which is about 15 to 20 miles to my west here. And the capital was going to be on land that was donated by an Oklahoma City resident named I.M. Putnam. Well, when it came down to it, the legislature wasn't exactly pleased that the land for the capital was so far away from the city seat of Oklahoma City. So they passed some legislation indicating that the land was going to be where I now stand, which was on two sections of land, kind of straddling land that was owned by the Harn and the Culbertson families that had been donated for the state capital. And as we now stand, we're about 2.5 miles from the city center of Oklahoma City. So now we get into the actual construction of the Capitol. On July the 20th of 1914, ground was broken in order to begin the construction process. The second governor of the state of Oklahoma, Governor Lee Cruz, swung his silver-plated pickaxe into the ground, broke ground, and officially started construction on the Oklahoma State Capitol. Now, construction of the Capitol took about 3 years. And the first year or so of construction was actually constructed by day labor that was hired and managed by the Oklahoma Capitol Commission. And later on, a construction company was brought on, and that was the James Stewart Construction Company. And they constructed not only this Capitol, but they had built the Idaho Capitol and the Utah Capitol as well. Construction on this building lasted until June 30th of 1917. And interestingly enough, some facts about construction, they actually had to run a rail line right up to the base of the Capitol to get all of the materials here. And there were actually about 400 train car loads of limestone that were used on this building. They had originally hoped to use Oklahoma native materials, but couldn't quite find what they needed. And so the base of the Capitol is red Oklahoma granite that was quarried in a quarry near Tishomingo. And the rest of the granite, or the rest of the limestone, came from Bedford, Indiana, in the quarries there. Interestingly to note, as we went through the restoration process, whenever we needed replacement limestone for the building, we went back to that original quarry area in Bedford, Indiana, to be able to get the same type of limestone that was used on the building. Now, one of the interesting things about the Capitol is the dome. Early on in construction, it was determined that the dome was superfluous. It was going to cost about $250,000 out of the $1.5 million that was allotted for construction, and they deemed that they wanted to have a Capitol that was big enough to fit all of the offices of state government in it, so they didn't have to pay rent. So the dome went away, and they said, we'll come back in a few years after get the money, put the dome on the building. It wasn't until 85 years later in 2002 that the dome you see here today was actually put onto the building. So the Capitol was finished in 1917. And throughout the years, it had some small restorations that were done to it. But really, it wasn't until the restoration project started in 2014 that we really did a full comprehensive restoration. So the exterior restoration was quite extensive. We have over 21 miles of mortar joints on this building. And all of those mortar joints, the mortar was taken out, new mortar was put in. We did over 4,600 stone repairs to the limestone and granite. We had pieces of limestone that were falling off the building and becoming safety hazards. All of those repairs were made, which was what's called a Dutchman repair process. All of the original 477 steel windows were completely restored in quite an extensive process. The large steel and cast iron doors you see at the main entrance were meticulously restored. We also put a brand new copper roof on the building. And I have people ask, well, why copper? Well, first of all, because it was the historic material. And second of all, because it's a very durable material and it's appropriate for the style of the building. There are 12 elevations on this building, and just the scaffolding alone on this $62 million project cost $3 million. We had to have our stonemasons and our window workers be able to get right up to the basic edge of the building. Now, another thing that we did is we have a tunnel that goes from this building underneath a major thoroughfare to a parking lot across the street. That tunnel was installed in 1974, but unfortunately it leaked terribly. We actually dug up the whole tunnel, re-waterproofed it, and then covered it back up and redid all of the interiors of it. Other things that we did on the building, all the steps all the way around the building, we took those up. These structures were structurally unsound, so we rebuilt the structures and then put the steps back onto the building. We have a brand new visitor entrance to the building. The main historic entrance to the building was no longer feasible because it's not ADA accessible. And so we put an entrance at the subgrade right over here. So, and the reason we went down is because we didn't want to build up anything that was going to disturb the historic integrity of the structure and obscure people's views. And this was a major entrance in terms of being able to enhance the function of the building and give people a beautiful new entrance, since we couldn't use that main historic entrance anymore. All of the historic light fixtures, we took those down. Those were sent to a company in St. Louis called St. Louis Antique Lighting, and those were rewired for LED lighting, and all of the historic fixtures were restored. And also, if there were missing pieces, those missing pieces were recreated based on original drawings that we had from the construction drawings 100 years ago. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about our contractors for a minute or two here. Our contractors on the exterior part of the project was J.E. Dunn Construction. Their architectural partners were ADG Architecture here in Oklahoma City, and also Trainer Architects based out of Topeka, Kansas. And they put a lot of their heart and soul into making sure this exterior was done correctly, and all modern historic preservation standards were used. And we are very, very proud of the work that was done out here. We now not only have a fully watertight building, but we have a building that is pleasing to the eye and has been fully cleaned and restored for the future of the state capitol. So what I want to do now is I want to go inside and I want to show you the new ground floor, which we used to call the basement of the state capitol. And I want to tell you about some of the work that we did on the inside to basically restore it from the infrastructure and also from the decorative part as well.
All right, so while Trait makes his way inside, I'm going to take you guys through some pictures and before and after shots of the Capitol building. So originally, the Capitol building was built without its dome, as Trait said earlier. This is a picture taken from the summer of 1917, and it's very fresh from construction, and there's no dome on top, so looks pretty short compared to what it looks like now. And the dome was added many years later in 2002, I believe. And it just really sets the tone of the skyline for Oklahoma City now, especially with the Guardian statue on top, which is made out of bronze. And it was actually made by the same company in Norman, Oklahoma, a local bronze foundry called The Crucible. And they recently installed the brand new bronze seal in the Capitol basement on the ground rotunda, where Trade is on his way to right now. So you can see a lot of changes to the exterior from before and after. As Trade said, a lot of the stone and the sealant that they use was deteriorating. You can see very visible signs of wear from over the years. So the project started in 2014, as Trade said, and we've wrapped up a lot of big projects this year, but it's not quite slated to conclude until 2022. Total cost of the renovations is $62 million. And this portion of the restoration addressed all 12 exterior elevations of the Capitol. And as we move through, you can see just how beautiful the restoration project has done at restoring the stone and the sealant and making the outside look beautiful. This construction shows some progress of the visitor center outside. As Trade said, we moved it from the first floor to the ground floor, actually, into the new visitor center in the basement. And we also made that entrance compliant with current accessibility standards, so everyone can access it and enter the beautiful foyer of the Capitol. So you can see the ramp that goes down to the ground floor in the visitor center. The moment you walk in, the holding area has a beautiful map of Oklahoma with etched counties of all the Oklahoma counties in the floor and the marble. And the last shot is a view from nighttime, which is equally beautiful with beautiful lighting that really shows off the progress made. And Trate will now be joining us from the ground floor rotunda. This was a big lift for the Capitol Restoration team because the rotunda didn't actually extend to the ground floor. So a big part of that restoration project was making the rotunda go all the way down and really being a cohesive experience for visitors. So on that note, I will pass it back off to Trate. Thank you.
Well, hello, everyone. We're back, and I am standing in the ground floor of the state capitol now. And there's a funny story about this particular floor here. Now, the state capitol was originally only authorized to have 3 floors. That's right, but I'm standing in a 6th-floor building. And what they quickly realized was to make the Capitol big enough, they were going to have to fudge a little bit on that. So the floor that I'm standing in used to be called, when the building was built, it was called the sub-basement. The first floor was called the basement. The second floor was the first floor. The third floor was the mezzanine. The 4th floor was the 2nd floor. The 5th floor was the 3rd floor, and the 6th floor was the attic. And so I always use this as kind of a humorous story to indicate that government doesn't change all that much over time. We're always very creative with how we carry out our mission. We renamed this floor the ground floor. And the reason that we did that was simply for the fact that with the new visitor entrance to the building coming in at this level, we didn't want to have the connotation of basement. We wanted people to feel like they were a part of the Capitol. So as people come into this space, part of that was to create a rotunda space in this floor. As Brian moves the camera up, you can see a new hole in the rotunda here, but before, this was actually solid floor. We cut a giant hole here and have created this new rotunda space, which is very beautiful and ties this floor in with the rest of the building. And we're very proud of that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that for a second, but really what I want to get into here is to talk about the interior restoration of the building. Now, the interior restoration of the building was very complicated because one of the decisions that we made early on was not to move people out of the building during construction. We looked at trying to do that, but we found it was going to be difficult to try and find a place for people to go and to move the legislature where the public could interact with the legislature. So what we determined was most of the work on the Capitol building was going to take place from June to January every year, which is the legislative interim. And during the times when the legislature was in session from February to May, we would work around them and work in other parts of the building. And so that made the logistics fairly difficult because we could never get into a space and say, for example, just rip out all the old plumbing. What we had to do was we had to install the new plumbing and then transition over to the new and then rip out the old. Quite an intensive process. And then when you think about that from the electrical point of view, the HVAC point of view, from phone and data point of view, you start to see that it took quite a bit of logistical planning to make sure we didn't take everybody offline. Now, I would be lying if I told you that we didn't occasionally clip the wrong wire. I'm remembering one time that we accidentally took down the entire Senate's phone system. But it was quite a job to do. Now, all of the utilities come and go from the basement here, or from the ground floor. And so we have brand new electrical system in here. We have a brand new electrical room with all modern state-of-the-art equipment. We have 100% of brand new plumbing and sewer systems installed in this building. We have all new HVAC components. And in fact, for the first time in the building's history, we're climate controlling the public spaces in this building with all new HVAC equipment. We have installed new life safety equipment. So that means new security cameras, that means new fire alarms and all the things that go along with that. And we've also done all the hazardous materials abatement. It's estimated that we have removed over 400 tons of asbestos containing material out of this building. As we've talked about, ADA was very, very important for this space. And so we have, for this building. And so we have gone throughout the process of making all of the spaces ADA compliant. We've done improvements to all the audiovisual systems in the building, and then all the interior finishes as well. One of the big things that we did for the first time since the building was open in 2017, we did temporarily move everyone out of the building to do an electrical switchover so that we could switch over from the old electrical equipment to the new electrical equipment. So we moved everyone out of the building out for a week, which took about 6 months of planning to be able to accomplish that. We had a phased approach to installing the new infrastructure. So we did what we called a single move project, where we would move agencies around, and as they moved into their newly completed space, that would free up space for us to be able to restore the area that they left behind. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about our company that has done this work. Manhattan Construction has done all of the interior restoration work, and their architectural partner is FSB Architects, which is based here in Oklahoma City. This beautiful seal that you see here, as we mentioned, was cast by the Crucible Foundry. We used to have a terrazzo state seal on the floor right above in the middle of the rotunda, and we wanted to go back in with a bronze seal. We thought that was more appropriate for the Capitol, and it has turned out just beautifully. It was just installed a few months ago, and we've heard nothing but rave reviews about it. The total cost of the interior restoration of the state capitol is about $205 million, and quite a bit. But as you can see, we have over 430,000 square feet in this building to cover, and there's not a square inch of this building that we won't have touched by the time that we finish this project. And everyone involved has done such an incredible job. So where I want to take you now is the Blue Room, which is the governor's ceremonial room. So we'll prepare to go ahead and make our transition up there, and I'll turn you back over to Krista.
Thank you, Trait. So while he is walking up to the Blue Room, which is arguably one of the most beautiful ones in the Capitol now, we're going to look at some of the features before restoration of the interior of the Capitol. So there were safety issues, there were unsightly doors, things just weren't looking their best and behaving their best before they took everything out and redid it. So the internal conditions, we had electrical rooms being used for storage instead of electrical stuff, and paper products causing hazards. In ornamental public places where visitors venture, they'd run wiring and cable improperly. They would put drop-down ceilings over ornamental plaster ceilings so they could run HVAC tubing and wires. And there were there was actually a 30-foot span of hallway where you had 3 different kinds of doors that had been put in there over the years, as you can see in the bottom right photo. And so the Capitol Restoration Project, in addition to making everything look prettier, the cohesiveness that I think the image of state government is going is really encapsulated here in this beautiful Capitol building. So Trait's on his way to the Blue Room, and one of the major upgrades this room got was a fresh coat of paint, and the artist did a tremendous job, and the detail is exquisite, and it's night and day, as you'll see in this next picture. It was really two-toned kind of before, like this baby blue and the white, and on the right, you can see how it looks now, the attention to detail, the vivid colors, the new chandelier. This is really like a welcoming space for the governor whenever we have visitors to the Capitol. So making this space look and convey the importance of our presence as a state was really important, and they definitely succeeded there. So I believe Trait is there, so I will pass off to him, and thank you very much.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to what we call the Blue Room. Now, a little bit of history on this room. Originally, the Secretary of State's office was just around the corner from us. And so this room was originally called the State Room. And it's always been used for those ceremonial functions that the governor or the executive branch might want to have in a room like this. Now, at one point in the 1940s, a renovation was done in here, and they actually put up this blue wallpaper all over the walls. That was this light baby blue color, which I'm sure if you saw the slides, you saw what it looked like before. But the ceilings, which have ornamental plaster on the ceilings, they were all just painted white. So a lot of that detail in that ornamental plaster never really showed through because really none of the building was painted correctly. This is something that I should mention, is that there were a lot of cost-cutting measures that were done when this building was originally completed. So one of the biggest was they didn't have the money to paint it. So you had a lot of white walls and white marble floors in here. And when we got into spaces like this that are clearly meant to be impressive and ornamental, we wanted to make sure that that they really said what they're supposed to say from an architectural standpoint. So our painting contractor on this project throughout the whole building is called Evergreen Architectural Arts. And they are historic paint consultants, which I didn't even know was a job before I had this job, but seemed like a really cool job. And they were also ornamental painters. And so they knew how to paint all of our plaster detail to really make it pop out in the right places and to really make that statement that we wanted to make. So the first governor of Oklahoma was Charles Haskell. He actually lay in state in this room when he died in the 1930s. The furniture from here, you see some of these large chairs behind me, that came during a renovation in the 1960s. And as we were approaching this room, we really did feel like the blue was quite a bit in your face. And so we wanted to mute some of the blue on the walls and then have the blue shine out more as accents through the furniture, through the rug, and then through some of the ceiling. So let's go ahead and talk about the ceiling, because it really is the star of the show. The ceiling, this was our only opportunity in the building to do a hand-painted kind of stencil painting that you might see pretty prominently in other historic buildings or other state capitals. And our team that painted this, actually a husband and wife team, Joe and Maricela Batchelor, who work for Evergreen Architectural Arts. Joe, both of them are accomplished artists. And all of what you see here is hand painted. He would do this in much the manner that the Sistine Chapel was done, is that he created templates, and then he used what's called a pounce method, where he had small holes in the template, and then he would pounce what kind of looked like a rosin bag to me, and that would put the pattern on the ceiling, and then he would hand paint that. And you might look in the future, because the gentleman who's doing my camera here, Brian, he has helped us do videos all throughout the project to help tell the story of this project. And we've got a great video that's forthcoming on how this room was done. All of the urns that you see to the sides were hand painted as well. And this room just really pops out. The marble floor was restored, a new rug was put in, the chandelier was restored as well. And now what you have a new sound system that was placed in this room. And now what you have is a very, very nice ceremonial room that the governor would use for press conferences, for ceremonial bill signings, and things of that nature. And occasionally the public can use this room for events and activities as well. And so, as Krista mentioned, this is one of my favorite rooms in the whole building, and one we're most proud of that has probably taken the biggest transformation in the whole process. And now we're going to get ready, and I'm going to go up to the Senate chamber, and I'm going to tell you about the work that we've done in the legislative chambers.
And while he's on the move, I will show you some very fun old photos. Trait said that the blue room is a big one for transformation, but the Senate chamber picture you're about to see shows that it underwent a major transition as well. So this photo is from May 1916, and it looks really bare, but it's a really stark contrast to what it is today. So the ceilings were a big aspect of this restorative effort in these rooms as well. They were repainted in the 2020 interim last year, so between the legislative sessions. And there were old glass press boxes, which you'll see in a moment, that they removed because they were not original to the building, obviously. But you can see, as Trait was mentioning, the attention to detail on the bones of the artwork that was already there, and just remastering them almost just really highlighted them in the best way. You can really see how they brought out a lot of detail that was kind of lost before, just by highlighting the right elements. And I think Trait said a lot of this was hand painted, like they had scaffolding up there, and just beautiful, beautiful artwork. So this is after the removal of that glass press box that was up there in the Senate chamber. And I will. So the Senate chambers are expected to be completed in the 2021 interim, so that they will be ready for the beginning of the 2022 session in February. So the legislators will be able to come back and view their beautiful new office spaces. And actually, since session just ended, our staff at the Capitol was able to take out everything they needed to start that process as soon as possible. So I will now go back to Trait.
Well, I'm here in the Senate chamber for the Oklahoma legislature. And you might see that it's a little bit torn up. And as I mentioned before, we have to do most of the work during that legislative interim. And they really waste no time, because you might think 8 or 9 months is plenty of time to be able to do work like this, but it's really not. If you think about all of the prep work that has to be done, all the planning that has to be done, the demolition that has to be done to certain areas, it really does stress the construction team. And so as soon as the legislative session ends, which in this case, it just ended last Friday, they get in here and start doing their work. And so we were not able to do all of the work in the chambers at one time. So half of the work was done during the last legislative interim, and then the other half of the work is being done now. And so I'm gonna find my notes here. There we are. And so we are starting this work here today. And so far what's been done in this chamber is they've taken out all of the seating up in the gallery. Now the gallery seating that was put in here was probably installed in the 1970s or 1980s. It was kind of like your old movie theater seating, not historically appropriate at all. I should tell you a little bit about the history of the chamber too. So if you would have been in this chamber in 1917, you would have seen a concrete floor, a red stained concrete floor, no carpet, and you would have seen they had these beautiful lamps that lined the walls here. They had the desk for all the members, and then they had the dais behind me, of course. And one of the things that they had in the back was this giant glass enclosure. Well, that wouldn't have been in 1917. That was added in a later renovation. When they got to the 1960s, that they really wanted was a kind of like a banker's boardroom work. So they covered up all the plaster with all this wood paneling. They installed the glass enclosure in the back so that they could have a place for the press to sit. And then in 1994, they came in and did another renovation where they tried to basically restore it to what it originally looked like. With the difference bringing, the floor that I'm standing on now is actually a false floor because they raised the floor about 2 inches so that they could run all of the electrical and all of the phone lines and the things like that that they need to do. So we're actually going to be rebuilding the floor in here. We're going to be putting new carpet. We're going to be running all new data wiring and cabling, which that's part of the infrastructure here, work here. You know, when this building was built, they did not envision things like data closets and data cabling. And so we've had to be very creative throughout the whole process about where do you put this stuff? And we've had to plan for that in the renovation. Every single wing has the data closet. And we've had to run thousands and thousands of, or probably hundreds and hundreds of miles of new data cabling to be able to make this a modern structure building. I always like to say this about the Capitol. Most buildings do one thing. Most buildings are either they're an office building or they're a museum or a tourist attraction. This building is all three. This building simultaneously has to serve as a seat of government. It has to be a place where legislators can come and where the public can interface with their legislators. It has to serve as a place that's an office building for all of the staff who worked in this building. And I worked here for 10 years, so I recognize that. And then it's a tourist attraction and it's a museum. And it has to be a place where people can come and learn about their state's history. And so it's all of those things. And that presents certain difficulties that you have to work through when you're planning a renovation through an old building where some of the things that we're doing were never even envisioned to have been done. So last interim, what we did was we came through and we did all the ceiling and above ceiling work. So what you can't see is brand new catwalks above the ceiling, brand new HVAC units that were put in. But what you can see is all the plaster ceiling has been completely repaired. A brand new audio system has been installed. All of the stained glass was cleaned and any repairs made that needed to be made. And then all new paint was added. So all that ornamental paint, which you'll see some before and afters if you haven't already seen them in Krista's presentation, but all of that ornamental paint was put in here just like we've done throughout the rest of the building. And now this interim will come down here. All of the paint on the walls at this level will be brand new paint, new carpet. The dais will be redesigned. Now, one of the things about the dais is it's not ADA accessible. And once again, that's been a big priority for us through the entirety of the project is making everything ADA accessible. So it's going to be completely redesigned. And then because the furniture that was in here wasn't original furniture, we're actually making brand new desks for the members that's going to complement all of the woodwork that we're putting throughout the whole project. The other thing we did is directly behind us here is the Senate Lounge. That room is a place for members to have meetings. There's restrooms in there for members. There's a place they can do press conferences. And so that room was completely restored during the last interim. And so as we're working our way through this project, really we only have 4 spaces left to go this interim to complete. One of those spaces is the House and Senate chamber. The other is the Hall of Governors, which is on the 2nd floor, and that's a place where all the governors throughout history have busts. The second place, or the third place that they're working is a new art gallery that's going to be placed on the 2nd floor as well. And then finally, we're adding a new state capitol museum, which my new agency, the Oklahoma Historical Society, is designing all of the exhibits so that we can tell the story of the state capitol and the political process that happens in this building and how bills become a law and so on and so forth. So we're really excited about all of that. And by spring of 2022, by the time the legislative session starts, this building will be complete and totally done at a cost of $280 million and after 8 years of work. And with that, I'll turn it over to Krista and we'll move into the 4th floor rotunda.
I'm really excited for you guys to see the 4th floor rotunda. Like all of the other rooms you've seen so far, this room has got a fresh coat of paint. But I think what makes this first image so impactful is that it's kind of that sepia black and white color. And it just shows how kind of beige toned everything was, and there wasn't a whole lot of definition and distinction between colors. And that is definitely not the case anymore. So you can kind of see a progression here from June 2019 to June 2020 to November 2020, so last fall. And they started with scaffolding in the middle here. They started kind of retouching some of the artwork and doing crown molding, and then really worked up the sides to create this contrast in colors to make it look like natural stone, like natural sandstone. They took off panels in front of these alcoves. So I think they used them to display art. But now they're going to replace the art now that the alcoves have been restored. It's just truly so much grander than it used to be. Colors, definition, incredible. It's in this space, I think, that you truly get the magnitude of the Oklahoma Capitol now, as opposed to what it used to be. Like we said before, the rotunda didn't always go down to the ground floor. It stopped at the first floor. But now being on the fourth floor, looking at all of the artwork from our history, looking at everything that's been refurbished and brightened, and you look over this railing here in the center of the room and you see the state seal below you made by that local foundry. And then looking up into the dome above, you know that the Guardian statue is up there bookending this beautiful building together. So I think this space in particular is a place where you truly get the full effect of the Capitol. So looks like Trait is there now. So you guys enjoy. Thank you.
Well, we're here at our last stop in the fourth floor rotunda at the Capitol, and this really is the crown jewel. This was the place, this is the place where you enter into the legislative chambers on each side in the east and west wings of this building. This is a place, of course, where you can see the beautiful dome. This is the place that was meant to be that sort of take your breath away moment as you come into your state capitol building. And I want to start out with the interior of the dome. And like I said before, the dome was put on in 2002, and that was done as a joint project between Manhattan Construction and Flint Co. Construction with the architects FSB, who are also doing this project, that designed the dome. And so you see the colors in the dome. The colors in the dome, you see the reds and the oranges, you see greens, you see a little bit of blues. That's meant to represent our state flower, the gaillardia, or also called the Indian blanket. And so you see the petal colors with the red and the gold, you see the green of the stem, you see the blue of the sky up there. Now, while we're talking about this, a lot of people ask us questions about the names that you see in the dome up there. The names are people or companies that gave at least $1 million to the dome construction project. So people kind of have a furrowed eyebrow sometimes when they're looking at it and say, why do you have names in your dome, or is your state capitol sponsored? Well, the dome is sponsored, and that was an agreement made with those donors several years ago when that project was done. The colors in the dome were vibrant and beautiful, but as you move down into the interior space of this rotunda, it was not vibrant and beautiful. And in fact, what it was before was most of the colors were kind of a pink and green pastel color and the walls were white. And of course, the marble wasn't near as white as you see it today. It was actually more of a dingy color. And so as we worked through this process, how are we going to paint the Capitol building? What colors are we going to use? You might think that becomes intuitive, or that they would just know what to do, but that wasn't the case at all. In fact, months and months and months of trial and trepidation and thought went into the colors that came into this building, because we did not have any original colors to go by. Most of the time you can come in and say, oh, here was the original colors. This is a historic preservation project. We're going to go back to the original colors. That certainly wasn't the case in this instance. And so what we had to do was go back and say, okay, we're going back to a 1917 timeframe. What would those original colors have been had they been installed in 1917? And then what we need to do is blend those colors to make them coordinate with the colors in the dome as they come down. So as you come down from the building is very vibrant up in the dome. The fourth floor is vibrant. The second floor is vibrant. As you go down, it gets a little bit more muted, and it changes a little bit as you get down and down and down until you get into the ground floor, which is probably the least colorful space in the entire building. And you know, I'm not a color guy, so I didn't have much to do with choosing the colors other than to say what I liked and what I didn't like. But I have to say that the work they did here was just absolutely astounding. This space pops out and is beautiful. The architectural ornamentation of the plaster comes out to greet you, whereas before you could hardly even see any of the details of the column capitals or any of the medallions or the Greek key pattern. And now you can certainly see that it pops out right out at you and it comes in. And then I have to say, you might see this, some people call it a checkerboard pattern on the walls. We call it an ashlar paint pattern. Once again, the walls were painted white, but all of the walls in this building were originally meant to be limestone blocks. And so they didn't have the money to put in limestone blocks, so they put in plaster walls and they scored the plaster. What we wanted to do was go back to what that original intent was. And so we painted it in a manner that resembled limestone blocks. And I believe Brian's giving you a good show of that right now. And once again, we weren't sure how it was going to go, but we did mock-ups, we did and it's come out. These were put in the 40s, but they're old enough. So we sent those off to St. Louis Antique Lighting, and they were restored and rewired for LED. You might see all of the stained glass that's over the grand staircase over here. The stained glass was all completely restored. It was over 100 years old, and the lead joints were falling apart. So we took every single panel out. They went to a craftsman here in Edmond named Tim Brown. He restored all of it. We put in brand new LED lighting over the stained glass panels and in all the troughs. So now this building just pops out. The other thing I want to mention too is our committee rooms. All of the committee rooms were completely redone, all with modern AV while retaining all of their original historical features. We put in new glass walls, all new tables and conference rooms. The seating all throughout the Capitol has been completely redone. So now we have nice classic seating for people to sit on. And then the marble floors go through a 9-step restoration. It's a grinding and polishing process that takes quite a while to do. But these floors, I guarantee you, if you would have been in here a few years ago, you would have seen a dingy brown marble floor. And now it's a beautiful white marble floor. These are Alabama marble floors here, and certainly beautiful. And then, as Krista mentioned, as you look over the railing here and you see our beautiful new state seal, our bronze state seal located down on the ground floor, we used to call the basement or the sub basement. So we have beautiful art that's scheduled that usually hangs on all of these walls. The art will be coming back. Even the niches that were originally designed for statuary, we're going to suspend paintings that were originally here in those spaces, and we have provided lighting in those niches for the paintings. And this is, once again, one of my favorite places in the whole building, and it's just going to get better after most of the artwork comes back in a few months. This project is scheduled for completion, like I said, in February of 2022, and hopefully by the middle of the year, we'll have our grand reopening ceremony next year. So this has been such a pleasure for me to be able to take you around and show you some of these spaces. I hope if you're some of our Florida friends that you'll make a trip to Oklahoma and come see our beautiful state capitol. And for my Oklahoma friends who are watching and you haven't been able to come here and see the changes, please do so. You're going to be blown away. So thank you for your time. And I believe we have some time for questions, and I'd be more than happy to answer those.
Thank you so much, Trade and Krista, for this wonderful opportunity to see the Oklahoma State Capitol in person during this tour. And it's just overwhelming to see all the work that has been done. And related to that, one of the questions that we received in the chat box was about the reuse or preservation of original materials. So you mentioned at the end here, Trait, that, for example, the marble is the original marble, but has been through a process, the 9-step process to redo it. And so were there other opportunities like the glass for original fixtures to be uninstalled and then reinstalled?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, everywhere we could, even though we weren't required to, we used the Secretary of the Interior standards for restoration. And we wanted to make sure that we were doing right by the people of Oklahoma and making this as much as we could a true restoration project. And so you mentioned the marble floors. You know, occasionally if we would run into a cracked or damaged piece of marble, of course, we would replace that. But by and large, all the marble is original and it's been restored. All of the historic light fixtures, like I mentioned before, we shipped those off. They were rewired for LED. They've been restored. So that goes for everything down corridors and hallways, the standing fixtures that you see here in the rotunda. All of the original windows on the building were restored. So the windows represented probably one of the biggest challenges on the whole project from a technical perspective. And we originally thought that we were going to be able to remove the window frame and the components, send them off to a factory in Kansas City. They could be restored and we would come back and put them back in. What we found out through our investigation process is those windows were actually part of the structure of the building. They mortared them in place. There was no way that we were going to be able to remove them. So we came up with a new plan. And that's, if there's a story of this whole project, it's pivot, pivot, pivot. It's okay, we run into an unexpected condition, we try to figure out a way to handle it, and we go on about our day. And so instead of sending them off, we restored them in place, which was hard because remember, we have an occupied building and somebody is sitting on the other side of that window. So we actually had to build a box on the inside of those offices so that we could have a barrier between construction going on the windows and the work that was going on outside from the scaffolding. The other things that we did, you know, of course, old, you know, electrical equipment, old plumbing, things like that, we didn't necessarily, you know, leave in place, of course, because, you know, we wanted to make this building brand new from an infrastructure standpoint. So what I like to say is this is a 1917 historic Capitol building, but all of the guts of the building, the thing that makes the building run from an infrastructure standpoint, all modern, 100% 21st century, brand new. And we're very proud of that as well. But this has been a true restoration project, and we have been very proud to be able to save everything that we could possibly save.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that answer. It's really interesting how you put it towards the end there, because a lot of times when we describe the historic Capitol building, we talk about it being an 1845 building inside of a 1902 building that was a 1970s building that now is a 1980s building that looks like it's 1902. So yeah, it's the nature of a Capitol, I think, is that it's always fluid, right, as a structure because of its long history. So that's awesome.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. The one other question, that's a personal question for me that I have is, did you save any of the things that were removed from the building to potentially put them on display talking about the restoration process? Like, have you planned an exhibit related to that? Because that's something we deal with all the time, are pieces of the building that were removed during the restoration that are now, you know, spread about the city, basically in private homes, in other collections, things like that.
Yeah, you know, that's a great question. And one of the things that I mentioned before that we're really fortunate to be able to do in this building is we are putting in a 4,000 square foot state capitol museum. And this museum is going to be state of the art. It's going, you know, I think people think, oh, Capitol Museum. I think they think about some dusty display cases and that. We're going to be fully digital. We're going to have artifacts on display. We're going to be able to tell the story of the Capitol in a dynamic way, but also the story of what happens in this building from a political perspective, from an agency perspective, and the three branches of government. And so as part of that museum, we have been collecting things that we found over the course of this construction project. And, you know, the construction workers were typically the ones that would find them because this stuff was tucked into chases and it was tucked into ceilings. And, you know, people knew that this building was going to be here for a long, long time. So pretty much anybody who could ever write their name somewhere, wrote their name somewhere. I'm not going to say that I wrote my name somewhere. I promise I did, because you just have to, right? you leave little clues for people that are coming behind you. But one time we had a worker that was in a dark closet or kind of under the stairs that no one had been in, stepped on a bottle, and the bottle was a note written by 3 workers who had been working in that area in 1933. Of course, we saved that. We found cigarette wrappers from the 1950s. We found a Milky Way wrapper from the 1940s. I've got a Schlitz beer can from the 1950s. So somebody was having some fun on the job back in the day. Of course, that might have been one of our legislators, who knows? But we've found all kinds of interesting things. In fact, at one point I found some old ductwork that we had to remove, and somebody named Jack had written his name on it and dated it 1916. And I had that portion of the ductwork cut out so that we could display it. So we have all kinds of cool things to show people, of people who have been telling their story in this building, just waiting to be discovered. I've got a newspaper clip from 1917. So those are some of the fun things that we've found, and I can't wait to get those on display.
That's awesome. That's such a great answer to the question. We have found also vodka bottles in addition to beer cans. So that's apparently a common thing.
I have not found that, although the project has made me want to drink vodka a lot. So.
No judgment, no judgment. Okay, let's see. We have a question from an attendee wanting to know about the Rotunda paintings and the themes there. And so I think they're talking about the murals as well, maybe as what's going to be reinstalled.
Yeah, so the murals that you see in this rotunda were painted by an Oklahoma artist from Miami, Oklahoma, which is in the northeastern part of the state, named Charles Banks Wilson. He was a very prolific painter, and he painted these murals, which are meant to tell the story of Oklahoma from basically the time of the European influence in the 1500s, all the way through the first land run in 1889 and into statehood. And so these paintings were painted in the late 1960s and then installed in this space. I think that people might recognize them as, being sort of typical of the time period of being sometimes a little bit colonialistic. But they are, you might see that all the other art has been removed from the building that could be removed. And obviously these are actually, we could not remove those. So during all the work that went on in here, we protected them in place. And so we cleaned them, we put plastic sheeting over them, which you can actually see some of our artwork behind me has some of the plastic sheeting still on it. And we worked very, very closely with our arts council to make sure that we were using the proper techniques to protect the artwork. And I should mention, my agency that I used to work for, the Office of Management and Enterprise Services, was in charge of the restoration project. But this was really a partnership project with many state agencies, the legislature, the Arts Council. We worked very closely with multiple groups within our agency, all the way from our IT people. We have about 20 agencies in the building, the governor's office, the treasurer's office. All of that work had to be coordinated, and we had to work closely with them. And so this was the true definition of a team effort, and it really showed what government can do when we decide to all work together, which was very gratifying to me.
That's a great way to kind of put kind of pin the end on the project. It's that it's everyone was involved, and now look at the success, basically. And that's what someone asked. That's kind of the last question I was going to put forward was, what are you most proud of, whether it's area or timeline or the project itself, when working on this project? So what are you most proud of, Trey, as we close it out?
When we started this project, we went to Kansas, and in 2014, Kansas was finishing their restoration project, and we were just beginning ours. And I had a conversation with the Speaker of the House in Kansas, and I said, hey, why was this project important to do for Kansas? And he said, the Capitol's our front door to the world. He said, when people come here from all over the country and from other countries, they come to our state capitol and they want to see what we're all about. He said, we weren't putting a good image out about what Kansas was. And it was the same thing with Oklahoma. Over 100 years, our Capitol building had fallen into a terrible state of disrepair. And in fact, a lot of people call it demolition by neglect, is that at some point you get to such a bad place that it becomes too cost prohibitive to do anything about it. And so I'm so proud of the fact, first of all, that our legislature decided it was a priority to preserve this building and to fully fund the restoration, which doesn't happen in all places. And we were very fortunate that. I'm fortunate that we've had OMES directors. I think we're on our 4th OMES director who found this project to be a priority and wanted to make sure it was done and done right. I am thankful for the fact that the governor, we've been through 2 governors now, and that both governors have placed this as a priority. And so what this means is that my children and my grandchildren will get to come to this building, will get to enjoy it. They will get to interact with their seat of government here. They will get to know that the state of Oklahoma is strong. And this is part of my legacy, but it's everybody's legacy who has had a part in this. And I'm just so proud that as we walk in here, it's not, oh, what is this terrible sewage smell? Or why is this plaster falling apart? Or why does this place look so terrible? Now the thought is, and people tell it to me all the time, is Trait, this place is beautiful. This is amazing. We can't believe that this is the result of this project. And to have Oklahomans be proud of something we've done here means the world to me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time tonight, and to you, Krista, too, and the entire Oklahoma team. We've enjoyed working with you on this program, and it's been really fun just to learn more about your operations and like you said, what you're able to share with Oklahomans and now with Floridians this evening. So thank you so much again to everyone that is here. Please fill out your survey to help us improve our programs. And we're just so appreciative of your time tonight, Trait and Krista and everyone. So thank you so much. And we can't wait to see you again here at the Historic Capitol Museum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, I think Krista, you stayed on. Thank
Hi,
you.
I wasn't sure if we needed to powwow after or anything.
Yeah, we were going to, but that's okay. I know it's probably a little confusing in the space to kind of stay on the meeting, but I think that went great. You did wonderful with the transitions and everything. It was great.
Thank goodness. I got the technical part down. I was just trying to fill the gaps, but I really control my breathing there after a moment.
The thing that's fun is
I was like, oh, I'm about to pass out, girl, slow down.
You did really, it was really great. And the thing that's fun now is that, like, since y'all did it and you kind of have the process together, y'all could do it again. Like when it's
absolutely. I feel much more comfortable now. Let's just start over. Let's do another one.
I know, right? Exactly. Well, thank you, Krista, for the last minute jump in. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for making this whole process so easy, and the direction was phenomenal. So thank you guys again. I had a great time.
It was nice to meet you.